All right, let's get started. So today we're discussing the Global Talent Visa application type and patents. So featuring patents in Global Talent Visa applications. I'm Samar Shams. I'm managing partner at Changes Immigration. And today I'm joined by Oliver Hoskett from HLK. Oliver, do you want to introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Samar. So I'm a patent attorney. I'm not a qualified solicitor. It's a separate area of the law. And I have a physics background, and I've been doing the job for about 15 years now. Anything that's sort of non-pharmaceutical that's in my area. So great. Thank you very much, Samar.
Thanks, Oliver. Today we're going to discuss the Global Talent Visa. I'll give you an overview first, and then we will look specifically at the technician type of application for Global Talent Visas and the requirements and processes for those applications. We will discuss the possibility of settlement after having a Global Talent Visa and dependents. And then Oliver is going to talk us through patents, which can be relied on in Global Talent Visa applications in at the endorsement stage to evidence some of the requirements. Okay, let's get started with an overview of the Global Talent Visa. So the Global Talent Visa is like gold dust. It's such an attractive option if someone's able to meet the requirements. Let's have a look at some of the key features. So first of all, it's for talented individuals in specific fields that enables them to come and live and work in the UK. One of the great advantages of the Global Talent Visa is that an applicant does not need a job offer from a UK organization that has a sponsor license. This is a non-sponsored type of visa that still allows work. Not only does it allow work as an employee, but Global Talent Visa holders can be self-employed. So relative to other routes, there are very few restrictions on the type of work that's allowed. Global Talent Visa holders can bring their dependents with them to the UK. And the Global Talent Visa route is a route to settlement. So depending on the subcategory for which an applicant is endorsed, they might be able to progress to settlement after 3 or 5 years. And the business requirements that have to be met at the settlement stage are relatively easy for the Global Talent Visa holder. And by that I mean relative to other UK visa types for business people and professionals. The Global Talent Visa is a path to citizenship for those who are eligible and interested. So it's really an attractive option. So as I said, the Global Talent Visa is open to people working in particular sectors of the economy. It's not an open-ended visa available to anyone. So academics are one group that might be eligible. Their endorsement applications would be assessed by the Royal Society, British Academy, Royal Academy of Engineering, or particular funding bodies, particular research and innovation funding bodies, depending on their area of expertise within academia. There's also the whole arts and culture category, and this is really broad. So they fall under endorsement by Arts Council England, but in practice, actually, Arts Council England has the relevant bodies that have the expertise within subsectors of the creative industries to assess the endorsement application. So arts and culture applicants could be architects, artists, so visual artists, different types of designers, photographers. So there are different subcategories to arts and culture. And although they fall to Arts Council England in general for in terms of responsibility for assessing endorsement applications, they will be endorsed by specific bodies. So for example, for architects, those endorsement applications would be assessed by the Royal Institute of British Architects, RIBA. Now, the sector we're going to focus on today, as I said, is the digital technology sector, and those endorsement applications are assessed by TechNation. So what type of applicants are interested in the Global Talent Visa? So it's a good option for existing tech business owners or other business owners in the relevant sectors. So maybe the owner of an architecture firm in the relevant sectors who want to expand their businesses to the UK. Maybe somebody wants to start a new business. That could be setting up a company, or it could be acting as a sole trader and they want to operate in the UK. It might also be attractive to people who are already in the UK under other immigration permission, so other types of visas like skilled worker, the graduate visa, or maybe as a dependent. So I'll just quickly run through some other immigration options that might be attractive to people who are considering global talent visas. So there's Innovator Founder. Innovator Founder is another option where the applicant first needs to secure endorsement and then uses that endorsement for their visa application. But with Innovator Founder, you're applying for endorsement to one of 3 endorsing bodies that's been approved by the Home Office, regardless of your sector. And that endorsing body is going to assess your business plan. And they're looking particularly at whether it's innovative, viable, and scalable. And if they find that it is, they would issue an endorsement. They would then monitor the business for progress against the business plan. And at the settlement stage, there are quite narrow requirements that have to be met. So this is an example of what I was talking about earlier when I said that the Global Talent Visa is attractive because of the relative ease at the settlement stage with which people can meet the business criteria, the business requirements. So for Innovator Founder, the business requirements at settlement stage are narrower. Then there's the sponsorpreneur route. So that is how we at Changes Immigration refer to a strategy of self-sponsorship. So essentially, a business owner can set up a company in the UK, and then that company can apply for a sponsor license and sponsor the owner to work in the business, for example, as a CEO or as a consultant, providing consultancy services to the clients of the company. A couple of things to keep in mind with the sponsorpreneur route is that you do need somebody who's based in the UK to act as the person responsible for the sponsor license. They're called the authorizing officer. And that person, if it's a new company, it's best if that person has residence in the UK, because new companies will be required to evidence that they have a corporate UK bank account. And so it can be difficult to secure a bank account or open a corporate bank account if you don't have somebody with residence in the UK to help with that. The sponsorpreneur route is a reliable option compared to the global talent. So sometimes with global talent, you have to apply for endorsement a few times, particularly in the digital technology sector. There's a high rate of refusal at the endorsement stage It is slightly better in other sectors. So for artists, it's a 20% refusal rate, but in the digital technology sector, it's a 50% refusal rate at the endorsement stage. People do apply multiple times for a global talent endorsement before securing it. So Sponsorpreneur is more reliable in that way, in that, you know, there are lots of steps to fulfill and duties to fulfill. But if you follow all the steps that you need to, then you're more likely to avoid risk than you would with a global talent visa. UK expansion worker is another option, and that can be useful if you don't have anybody on the ground in the UK who can serve as the authorizing officer. So it allows somebody from an overseas business to come and set up the business in the UK. They are expected to switch to the skilled worker route within 2 years. And so it's a UK expansion worker is more of a stepping stone than a long-term solution, but it is useful for UK business expansion. I would say it's important to keep in mind that you must not have started trading in the UK if you're interested in the UK expansion worker visa. There's also a high potential individual visa route that's available to applicants. And to be eligible for that, you have to have a degree from what the Home Office considers to be one of the top educational institutions in the world. So it is, there are narrow eligibility criteria, but that can, again, be a useful temporary option. It's not a long-term option for living and working in the UK, the high potential individual visa. All right, now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the TechNation endorsement applications. So what types of endorsement applications could one make? What are the requirements and what are the processes? So TechNation endorsement applicants are can either be technical applicants or business applicants. So technical applicants are the actual data scientists, software engineers, the developers who are working on, for example, the coding directly. So they're going to be experts in machine learning, cybersecurity, etc. Business applicants will have held roles as senior executives in digital technology businesses. They might be dealing with operations, they might have CEO roles, they might have been founders, and they will have demonstrable success at having expanded, grown digital technology businesses. So there are two types of endorsement applicants in that way. There are also two types of applicants in terms of the duration of one's experience in digital technology. So if you have been working in digital technology for 5 years or more, then you are going to be considered under the exceptional talent criteria, which are higher, more difficult to meet than you would be if you've been working in the digital technology sector for less than 5 years, in which case you would be assessed under the exceptional promise criteria. Now, if you've been working in the digital technology sector for 5 years or more, then you cannot apply on the basis of exceptional promise. You can only apply on the basis of exceptional talent. If you've been working for less than 5 years, you could try for exceptional talent. The benefit would be that you would have the possibility of advancing to settlement, to indefinite leave to remain after 3 years as a global talent visa holder. So if you've been working in digital technology for less than 5 years, you could apply for exceptional talent. And TechNation, if they assess your application, they find you don't meet the criteria for exceptional talent, their process is such that they should then assess your application against the exceptional promise criteria. But they'll only do that if you've been working in tech for less than 5 years. The other way that TechNation endorsement applications break down is basically that you will have to identify your field within digital technology. So that might be AI and or machine learning, cyber, fintech, etc. So you would have to identify your subcategory within digital technology. So let's talk about the process. The application process is a two-stage process. So I've been talking a lot about endorsement, and that is because the stage where you apply for endorsement to the endorsing body, TechNation, is the more difficult part of the application process. So at the endorsement stage, you're gathering information and documents. We'll take a look at what those what types of documents you might be able to provide a bit later. You complete an endorsement form on gov.uk, and you pay the endorsement application fee at that stage. And then you're directed to a TechNation endorsement application form where you're going to provide information about your experience, and you'll then upload your documents to the TechNation endorsement application form as well. So once you've submitted your endorsement application, the processing time is up to 8 weeks for the endorsement stage. There is a possibility that your application would be processed more quickly if you fall under the fast track option. We will look at that in a moment, but it basically involves having been accepted onto one of a number of specified accelerator programs in the UK. That would lead to TechNation processing your application for endorsement within 3 weeks instead of 8. So that's stage 1, the endorsement application. If you are successful in stage 1, then you use the endorsement letter or notification, it's really in the form of an email, to apply for your visa application, to apply for your Global Talent visa, or Global Talent immigration permission. At the visa stage, you're again gathering information and documents to show that you meet the criteria at that stage. You complete and submit an application form, upload supporting documents, and you have to book and attend a biometrics appointment. At least that's the process for now. It might be that you're able to submit biometrics via an app by the time you apply. So the processing time at this stage, I think the slides are, the information on the slide is reversed there. It's 8 weeks if you're inside the UK and 3 weeks if you're outside the UK in terms of processing time for Global Talent immigration permission. In terms of the documents, so this is the burning question on all applicants' minds. What are the documents that you should submit with a TechNation endorsement application? So the supporting evidence, the framework of this required supporting evidence is the same for all types of TechNation endorsement applications. So it doesn't matter if you are applying under the exceptional talent subcategory or exceptional promise. It doesn't matter if you're a business applicant or a technical applicant, and it doesn't matter what your field within digital technology is. The supporting evidence that you provide will have to include a personal statement, your CV, and 3 letters of recommendation. And you will have to provide at least 2 documents showing that you meet the mandatory criteria, and at least 4 documents showing that you meet the optional criteria. Now, the mandatory and optional criteria evidence can total up to 10 documents. So that doesn't include the personal statement, which is entered on the endorsement application form, the CV, or the 3 letters of recommendation. But there's a limit in terms of the documents used to evidence that you meet the mandatory criterion and the optional criteria of 10 documents. And those 10 documents, each of them has to be no longer than 3 sides of A4 in length. In terms of the mandatory criterion or criteria, you have to show recognition as having the potential to be a leading talent in the digital technology sector within the last 5 years. So if you're applying as exceptional talent under the exceptional talent category, you're going to have to show recognition as a leading talent in the digital technology sector in the last 5 years. For exceptional promise applicants, you would be assessed against having recognition as having the potential to be a leading talent in the digital technology sector in the last 5 years. So let's break down this criterion. In terms of recognition, TechNation is looking for recognition at the national or international level. They want external third-party sources where possible. They would consider publications, press, that kind of thing, speaking engagements, and awards. In terms of being a leading talent, TechNation is really looking for people who have a level of expertise that means that they are at the forefront of their field. So they're really leading innovation in their field, and you have to be able to demonstrate success, essentially, to be granted endorsement from TechNation. They also are quite particular about what they consider to be experience within the digital technology sector. And they'll refer to the experience having to be with product-led businesses. So that means businesses that provide a proprietary digital technical service, product, platform, or hardware as their primary revenue source. So that means that you can't be part of a web development business that has a kind of small side project of a cool app, for example. It has to be the primary revenue source. It is possible if you work in a large organization and you are focused entirely, your work is dedicated to one product within the business that's innovative. It's possible that they would accept that as as fulfilling the requirement to work with a product-led business or in a product-led business. So, a common type of application is one where software development, you're evidencing experience in a company that was developing software. Okay, in terms of the evidence for mandatory criteria, TechNation gives some examples of what they accept. The TechNation examples are only that, so there are no definitive list of required documents that are necessary to evidence fulfillment of any of the criteria. These are some of the examples given for mandatory criteria. So showing that you've led growth for the business, and you can use a letter to evidence that. That would be in addition to the 3 letters of recommendation that we discussed earlier. You could also show that you contributed significantly to an open source project, you've won awards, you've published articles, you've served on a professional panel. So for example, assessing a panel where you've assessed other products in the digital technology sector, and a contract, an employment contract evidencing a high level of remuneration could also be used as evidence of fulfilling the mandatory criteria of recognition as a leader or potential leader, because essentially it reflects that you are being remunerated for that high level of expertise that they're looking for. So in terms of optional criteria, there are 4 optional criteria to choose from when you're applying to Technation for endorsement. And they are innovation, so either as a founder, senior executive, or an employee working on a new digital field or concept, or proof of recognition for work beyond your occupation, so outside of your day-to-day job or work, that contributes to the advancement of digital technology, or having made significant technical, commercial, or entrepreneurial contributions to the field as a founder, senior executive, etc., or an employee of a product-led digital technology company. And then finally, the 4th optional criteria you can choose from is having demonstrated exceptional ability in the field by academic contributions, so published research. You have to choose 2 of these optional criteria. Now, in our experience, people usually rely on innovation and significant contribution, those 2 criteria. So I'm just going to discuss those in a bit more depth. In terms of innovation, the endorsing body Technation will want to see evidence of the product development, so actual documentation of the product development and proof of product in market, so revenues generated by from the product. They will want to see audited accounts for previous businesses you've worked in, financial projections, articles of association. They want to see sales data. You can use your employment contract again in terms of innovation to evidence innovation. And this is where you could rely on a patent or patent application. Oliver is going to speak about that a bit later. The other optional criteria that people often rely on, as I said, is having made a significant technical, commercial, or entrepreneurial contribution. And what the Technation is looking for here is that your contribution has had impact. So they regard this as somewhat distinct from the innovation criteria. What they're looking for here is impact. So you could, as a technical applicant, you could evidence that you've developed high impact products. Maybe you were the key engineer in the core product of a startup, and you're able to demonstrate the success of that product. For business applicants, you could again rely on an employment contract, a letter from an employer, or you could share details of the sales pipeline that you built and delivered, and the growth that you generated for a business in the digital technology sector or several businesses in the digital technology sector. So if you're relying on a patent application for innovation, to evidence innovation, it can be particularly useful to be able to point to a patent application if you're applying as an employee and you're trying to show that you are working on or worked on a new digital field or concept as an employee. So you can use a patent application to evidence that. But keep 2 points in mind. First of all, it has to be verifiable on Google Patents. And secondly, Technation is not going to consider patent applications that they think have been made solely for the purpose of progressing or enhancing your global talent endorsement application. And unfortunately, they don't give a lot of detail on when they will consider a patent application to do that. So there's no kind of particular timeline that restricts, when you submitted the patent application versus when you've applied for endorsement from TechNation. But do just be aware that they will take that into consideration. Okay, I mentioned before that there's a fast track processing option, and that is for applicants who've been accepted onto an ongoing or a future program at one of a number of specified UK accelerator programs. So it's only particular accelerator programs. We've listed some of them here. This isn't all of them. But these are some examples of the accelerator programs, the participation in which can be used to have your application for endorsement processed within 3 weeks instead of being processed within 8 weeks. All right, let's talk about settlement and dependence. So as I said, global talent is a route that leads to settlement. There's a residence requirement. So you have to have been resident in the UK for 5 years if you're endorsed for exceptional promise by TechNation or Arts Council England for one of those creative fields that we discussed earlier. Otherwise, you would only need 3 years of residence to progress to potential eligibility for settlement. So for example, if you are endorsed for exceptional talent by TechNation, then you could be eligible for settlement after 3 years of holding the global talent visa. You can combine time spent in the global talent visa route with time spent in some of the other work routes under the immigration rules. So for example, skilled worker, that's a sponsored worker type of visa, or the innovator founder visa that we discussed briefly. Time spent under those routes can be combined with time spent as a global talent visa holder. So if you switch from skilled worker to global talent, you can then combine the time spent on skilled worker with the time spent on global talent to meet the 5-year residence requirement under exceptional promise, or the 3-year residence requirement under exceptional talent. To be eligible for settlement, your absences from the UK must not exceed 180 days in any 12-month period. And that means any 12-month period throughout the qualifying period of 5 or 3 years. It's not calendar years. It's not counting back in 12-month periods from the date of application. It's any 12-month period falling within the 3 or 5-year qualifying period. There's an earning requirement. So this is what I would refer to as the business requirement that I talked about earlier, which is relatively easy to meet for global talent visa holders. You just have to be able to demonstrate that you've earned money in your field in the UK. There are certain documents that the Home Office likes to see from applicants. I'm not going to go into that today, but the overall requirement in terms of your business activity in the UK at the settlement stage is that you've earned money in the field for which you were endorsed, and you've earned that money in the UK. You also, at the settlement stage, have to demonstrate English language proficiency. That has to be at level B1 of the Common European Framework for Languages or above. And you have to sit and pass the Life in the UK test. You can bring your family members with you. So you can bring your partner, and that includes a spouse, civil partner, some unmarried partners that you've been in a relationship akin to marriage with for at least 2 years, and you can bring your children. They would be granted immigration permission in line with your own immigration permission or visa, and your adult partner would have the right to work in the UK. That would include employment or self-employment. They could also study in the UK, and they would, similarly to you, be eligible for settlement in the UK or indefinite leave to remain, and potentially ultimately eligible for British citizenship. Oliver, you've been waiting so beautifully and patiently. Please may I hand over to you for a brief overview of patents.
That's very kind of you. So thank you, Smart. Next slide, please. Whoever's in control.
There you go.
Great. So it's just going to be a quick whistle-stop tour about what patents are, advantages of them, and some common myths and conceptions. So what are patents? They are intellectual property rights. Other examples of which you might have encountered are trademarks and copyright. That's much more common. So patents are legal documents. They protect a technical idea, which is to say they protect an idea in the context of some sort of technical application. They can protect an invention in any field of technology. So products, physical items, compositions, processes, methods, drug formulations, all sorts. So whenever a technical problem has been solved with a technical solution, there's likely something patentable in there. So standard examples of these, if you've got new product features or treatments or effect, or you're doing something faster or with lower power, if it's electronic, more efficiently, something's more robust, it fails less often, cheaper, greener, all these sorts of things, almost any field of technology. Hardware and software engineering, drug discovery, toothbrushing, anything really. So things that are not technical, though, are, for instance, subjective things, subjective criteria being, for instance, whether something is stylish. So that's considered sort of not technical. Similarly, methods of doing business. But a common misconception is things like software, which in certain regards, depending on what they're controlling, is patentable. So in terms of the legal framework, a patent represents a bargain, a contract between the state and you as an individual or an applicant. So the deal is, in exchange for you publicly disclosing your invention, which you write down in this patent document, and you explain how it works, you give that information to the public, and in return for that, you can get a limited monopoly right on your invention for 20 years. So as a monopoly right, it's a little bit technical, but it's just worth saying, it's a negative property right. So it's a right that you can use to stop other people from working your invention. What it's not is a positive right. So it doesn't give you the right per se to do anything. It means, for instance, if you're doing something and you've got a patent for that thing, just because you have a patent for it, it doesn't mean that actually someone else doesn't also have a patent that covers some aspect of what you're doing. So that's the kind of negative framing. In terms of a legal object, it is an object like any other. So it's an item of property. It can be sold and licensed and mortgaged, etc. So it can be very valuable in that way. And finally, really important things, they're territorial rights. So they're tied to a particular country or selection of countries. You can't have a worldwide patent, for instance. You've got to choose locations. Great. Thanks, Smart. Next slide. Good. So advantages of patenting, outside of the context of today's webinar in relation to visas, of course, you've got to pursue them for other means too, and they've got many advantages. They provide a competitive advantage over third parties. So with a granted patent, it becomes more difficult and expensive for your competitors to produce anything because they need to be aware that they can't infringe your patent. So you need to design around it. And even if a patent is not granted, so that period of time where you've just got it pending, the presence of a pending application still dissuades competitors from doing what they plan to do. Another advantage is they provide the opportunity to open additional revenue streams, so potentially into new, sometimes unforeseen markets. This can, for instance, be through licensing or sale or investment. So you don't have to go and do the activity yourself. You can just sell the right to someone else. They can strengthen your negotiating position, such as in a dispute with a third party, or they may simply stop a company from being sued. You can use them defensively or on the attack. Patents improve your perception of a business as being an innovator. So they show that what you're doing is unique and it's fundamental, for instance, to tech valuations. This probably bounds on why Samar was talking about them earlier, how they can be used to justify the kind of entrepreneurial, innovative energy you're putting in. So finally, there are also tax incentives if you've got companies here and people are doing R&D here. So that incentivizes R&D in the UK. Great. And then the final slide, please, Samar. Thanks. So just a couple of common myths and misconceptions. The first really is that they only protect really radically complex or amazing discoveries. And in fact, this just isn't the case. Lots of patents are actually just for incremental improvements in things which came before them. So the legal test here, there's just two kind of important arms of it. It's whether it's new and whether it's inventive. So new really does just mean new, as long as it's something that someone else hasn't done before. Then inventive is the real legal test, and it means something like it has to be arguable that it wasn't obvious to do that thing. Lots of nuance there, of course, but at a high level, those are the concepts. So as long as it wasn't a totally simple thing to do, not a routine design modification, for instance, it might be the case that you have something patentable there. So that kind of bar for investigating patents is quite low. To getting one, it might be a little higher, but to start the discussion with a patent attorney, it's quite low. Well, as long as you think you've done something new and it solves a problem, you should consider patent protection. Myth 2, they take a long time to get. So it can typically take between 3 to 5 years to obtain a grant. Okay. This can be a good thing in and of itself because the longer time period can be advantageous for you in ways we described earlier. It can also help to just delay costs and to give you more options to take the patent in the direction you want to take it. Second, but they can actually be accelerated anyway. You can do it in much shorter timescales if you need to. A good example is there's lots of incentives for if you're working in green technology, the government will allow you to accelerate these things. So you can get them done faster should you need to. And then finally, they're very expensive. Now, this can certainly be the case because patents they cover all kinds of different technologies. So for mega drug discoveries and huge software systems, they can be very expensive. But on the more focused scale for kind of single products, the cost is orders of magnitude less. So you can have patents drafted and filed in the kind of £3,000–4,000 region for simple inventions, and that number can go up to sort of anything really. But regardless, the task can be directed from the beginning. You can have this discussion with a patent attorney, and of course, your budget can be accommodated within reason, no matter what it is. The official fees at the UKRPO are really low, £150 for filing, that sort of number. So again, it's really worth having that conversation if you think you've got this potential patentable activity going on in your business. Good. Okay, so I think that's the end from me. And obviously, if you're interested in exploring this stuff further, please do contact me. I'd be happy to talk to you. Thanks, Samar.
Thanks so much, Oliver. And that is the end of our presentation. Does anybody have questions? I'm surprised there are usually many more questions throughout. The first time I've not had any questions. Does anybody have questions now? Please feel free to ask in the chat. You can also contact us at your leisure. Our details are there. So please do get in touch if you have any questions. Looks like nothing's coming through yet, so we're done in time. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. I hope that it was informative, and if you need any help with a patent application or a global talent application, please do get in touch. Thanks.